Welcome to Support Life, a program focusing on social issues from a life-affirming perspective. Norm Curry is my name, and we're speaking with Dr. Rachel Carling-Jenkins, a member of the Victorian Upper House and the DLP. Thanks for coming back in again, Rachel.
Thanks for having me again, Norm. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we had a good conversation last week about the Infant Viability Act.
Yes.
Which is an act which you've drafted and are presenting in the second reading soon to come up. Very soon,
yes.
So in that, there's obviously abortion is a central issue. Now, as far as abortion clinics are concerned, there's been a recent development which is sort of to put a no-go zone around them. What's that about?
That's right, Norm. Unfortunately, last year we just seemed to have a tsunami of legislation that we were reacting to, and one of these was the Safe Access Zones, or the Buffer Zones Bill, which put now 150-metre no-go zones around all abortion clinics here in Victoria, and also around GP clinics that dispense RU486. That one's really difficult because we don't know which GP clinics dispense the abortion drug, RU486, and which don't. So basically we have to assume that all GP clinics will fall into this category.
Yes.
Which makes a lot of, particularly the Melbourne CBD, absolute no-go zones for pro-life protest, but even pro-life conversation. So my concern around this bill, which I voiced in Parliament, was it was based on a false narrative, a false narrative that people were being harassed walking into abortion clinics, that the pro-lifers are crazy and dangerous. And I think the main reason why pro-lifers were being seen in that light was because they're bad for business. So we know throughout the world, and we certainly know here in Victoria, that if there are protesters outside an abortion clinic, or sidewalk counsellors, or people even simply praying, so simply praying the rosary, for example, has a powerful impact on the people walking into the clinic. And there are many people who will not go through with their abortion if they see some level of resistance outside.
Yes.
So in our current Victoria, where there is no mandatory counselling, there's no need even for a GP referral. A woman can walk in to an abortion clinic pregnant and walk out that same day with no baby. We know that these people, these devoted pro-lifers, were actually saving many, many lives. And that was really very bad for business. We also know that it's around the idea that our viewpoint needs to be shut down. So the pro-life voice inside Parliament scares the left. And they are for freedom of speech everywhere for everyone, unless you have a pro-life perspective.
Yes. And this is a freedom of speech issue, that's for certain. Well, you just mentioned then that a woman walks into an abortion clinic. Just coming back to that definition, or the difference between a woman and a mother walks into an abortion clinic and walks out a woman.
That is very true.
That's quite an interesting distinction.
It is.
But when you come down to someone who's doing something as innocuous as praying the rosary, that is included.
That is included, absolutely. Right. And it's within 150 metres. So it doesn't have to be right outside the footpath or even across the road. It can be within a cafe. So people who represent a pro-life view can be in danger of being arrested under this law. It's very, very harsh. And it will penalise people for having a pro-life conversation outside of their churches, for example, if they're in the 150-metre zone. The subjective measure within this bill is that it causes offence. So if it causes offence to the mother/woman, or if it causes offence to one of her family members, or even more worryingly, if it causes offence to someone who works within the abortion clinic. So you can imagine that the doctors that work in the abortion clinics, the nurses and the receptionists and the psychologists are particularly going to be on the warpath looking for people who cause them offence. And subjectively, if they can claim that I, for example, am causing offence because I'm having lunch at the same place they have lunch, and I have my DLP How to Vote cards out where it talks about being pro-life from conception to natural death, I could be arrested under this law if I'm doing that within 150 metres of their clinic.
This is the most incredibly egocentric activity. It's all about me. It's just amazing.
That's actually a really good description, Norm. It is very egocentric.
It is. So let's not offend anybody. The one little creature that is not referred to as being offended is the unborn child, who would be extremely offended because it's just about to be killed.
That's
so
very
I think
true.
that would be very offensive.
Yes.
Talking about killing people, you've got some views on euthanasia.
Oh, absolutely. And this is something that we face constantly having conversations on in Victoria. So you may be aware that the Greens have been members of the Victorian Upper House for 3 terms now. This is their 3rd term. Each term they bring in some form of euthanasia in legislation or in some kind of motion. And last year they brought another motion up to work towards a bill on euthanasia. And what came out of that was an end-of-life inquiry. That end-of-life inquiry has been extensive. We've seen a lot of people put in submissions to that. A lot of the pro-life organisations around Victoria have put in submissions, and they've been excellent, great quality submissions, I will say. And that inquiry will be winding up in a few months. At the moment, it looks like that will bring up a first step, if you will, euthanasia type legislation into the Parliament either later this year or early next year. The danger is, of course, anything incremental. If you give someone a foot in the door with this kind of legislation, it enables in the next term of Parliament, particularly if the Greens hold the entire balance of power next time, it enables them to open that door wide and actually have euthanasia.
We're out of time, so we'll be back in a moment. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Norm Curry, and we're speaking with Dr. Rachel Carling-Jenkins, MLC and member of the DLP. We were talking about euthanasia, and that's sort of the other end of abortion, of course.
Yes.
But it also ties across into another thing you've expressed an interest in, which is elder abuse. So it's the other end of the scale. And so we've got people at one end, they're deciding to abort someone right simply 2 seconds before they're born and consider them to be non-existent. And then you've got at the other end people who have lived a fulfilling life and they have no inverted commas purpose anymore, so we'll abuse them, or we'll set about putting in a system we can kill them if we don't want them around.
Yes.
You've asked questions about it, you've made statements about it.
I certainly have. Elder abuse really concerns me. Obviously, euthanasia legislation will always target the most vulnerable in our society. And because we have an ageing population, bringing in euthanasia laws now does seem to have a direct correlation to the number of incidences we have in Victoria being reported around elder abuse. And that's only the incidents that are being reported. So I'm concerned with the amount of abuse that's happening that we don't find out about.
That's right.
So the number of, mums or dads who are living in the back granny flat where they've been, all of their life savings are gone, those kinds of, they're being financially abused, or they're suffering in many other ways. And I think that obviously is wrong, and it's something that we should be addressing. We should be addressing that rather than taking that easy option, so to speak, of going down the path of leading to euthanasia. The most vulnerable in our society also include people with disabilities, of course, and we have had inquiries in Parliament around the abuse that people with disabilities suffer. It's the same kind of thing. It's when people's lives, as you described, are seen as no longer worth living. So it's a huge concern here in Victoria.
Yes, it's a disability, of course. Well, you may not agree, but it appears that disability has moved a lot of steps forward. Disability has raised its profile a considerable amount.
Yes.
How do you compare that profile to euthanasia? Is euthanasia as big an awareness, and the most important bit is actually, as you mentioned, about mothers. Mothers need support.
Yes.
Well, clearly there's two groups which need support here. One is the family and the other are the elders.
Yes.
What's happening in that regard?
That's right. Look, there's a really an ad hoc response, I think, at the moment to this issue. So some organisations are doing a fantastic job, but there's also still a lot of people in our community that are vulnerable and people that may not be connected to any services or connected to very limited services. So as we know, there's an ageing population, a lot of people going towards that age of vulnerability again. Within disability, you're right, there is a much stronger profile. There is a lot more around advocating for disability rights.
Yeah.
There's a strong profile within the disability rights movement against euthanasia through groups like Not Dead Yet, which are very confrontational and controversial, and they do that very deliberately. There is less of that in the elder abuse or the ageing population. There is less profile. There's less of a movement against that, which is a concern.
Yes, it is, because as children are voiceless, or babies at least are voiceless, older people often become voiceless.
Absolutely.
As you said, they're buried in the backyard and their health is not as good as it used to be.
That's right.
Well, let's have a look in the middle somewhere where you've got, and we're talking about children at this point, and that's the impact of pornography, for example, on children. You have some views on that.
Absolutely. So my views around that are quite simple. Pornography harms children. It is far too freely available to our children now. I can remember very clearly when my son first came home from school and said he was shown a magazine around pornography. Now my son's an adult, and so back when he was in school, at that age, I think he was around 10 and he'd been shown a magazine. He was able to, put that away, tell the teacher, give it back to the boy and say something about it.
Yes.
But our children now who are 10 have smartphones, have iPads, have computers. So it's not a magazine that can be folded away and shown to someone. It's images that come up on their screen.
That's
It's
right.
things that keep occurring. So they're very vulnerable. We don't have very good filters on our internet providers. We don't have filters on our internet providers. Family Voice have been doing a great job around advocating in this space. And it's something I've raised in Parliament to, particularly for schools, to be starting to be aware of this issue. We know that most boys and also overwhelming numbers of girls have now seen pornography as children, and the effect that has on their relationships is proven to be quite detrimental. So it's something that schools need to become aware of so that they can counsel children when needed, and also that they can start. They put iPads on the list of items that parents must buy for their children. They need to take some responsibility for making sure there's filters on those iPads and laptops.
Absolutely, but I think this also goes into the same areas. Well, we're talking about abortion and we're saying that the emotional and psychic costs on people involved, as much as they might choose to deny it, it would be there.
Sure.
Similarly with pornography, would you agree that focusing on the effect of pornography on children is missing the other end, which is the effect of pornography on adults, which is a lot of research being done on it now, because it has the capacity to alienate the person from self, because it's image outside of self.
Yes.
And so that's something which is sort of out of sight as well. So
that's very true. And then the root, of course, is the production of pornography. So doing something about the production of pornography here in Australia.
And the production of pornography takes time, and we're out of it. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Norm Curry and we're speaking with Dr. Rachel Carling-Jenkins, MLC and member of the DLP. This is fascinating because I'll let you know the research that I've done in relation to you. I've looked through your website and I can see the sorts of questions that you've asked and the papers, the speeches that you've made, etc. So I'm sort of going through those. So I'll hit you with some of those. You see,
all right.
I know you've got something to say. Now, safe schools. Now, how does a safe school work? What's happening here?
Look, the Safe Schools program is anything but safe. It has been, recently it's come out, and Australian Christian Lobby have done a great job in this space. They've been working in this space for over 12 months now. Okay. We're starting to see the fruits of that through the media that they have been getting in recent weeks, and through the successful lobbying of the federal government. Yeah. Unfortunately, here in Victoria, the Victorian government is still determined to keep this program in place and to make it mandatory across state schools within the next couple of years. So they're rolling it out, continuing to roll it out. It was developed by a woman who very openly admits to being a cultural Marxist, that it wasn't an anti-bullying program at all, but it's a program to teach and to promote gay and lesbian lifestyles. So very much an infiltration of that very narrow viewpoint into our schools. When it says program as well, it makes you think of something a little bit like SRI, something that's taught for half an hour every week, but it isn't. This program is something that goes across all areas of the school. It impacts on all curriculum teaching. All teachers need to be trained in it, and there are posters all around the school promoting alternative lifestyles and promoting the ideas that children are able to choose their sexuality. Even down to things such as we heard reports of a boy with an intellectual disability coming home and telling his mum, after being exposed to this program, that the teachers told him he was allowed to wear a dress, which obviously confused the boy. And then reports of being encouraged to identify with your agenda of the day, which means that if you're a boy, you can use the girls' toilets, or if you're a girl, you can use the boys' toilets, and the safety concerns that parents have raised around those issues. So it infiltrates every area of the school.
Well, it infiltrates your intellect as well. That is
very true, yes.
That is just incredible. So actually what we're talking about here, it's all about me. It's all about I, me and mine.
That's right.
It is egocentric to the absolute extreme. That is amazing. So
Absolutely.
This is a program.
And it's a program that they've been introducing into schools, which I was able to stop from being tied to the funding for Catholic schools and independent schools last year, but we're not sure how long we'll be able to stop that as well. So it's one that the socialist left government that we have in currently are determined to roll out eventually across all schools here in Victoria. There's even an adaptation of the program for primary schools, so it will be through all levels of school.
Look, my mind doesn't spin often, but it's spinning now, I can tell you that. That is just unbelievable. So those little yellow triangles with a smiling house on them, that sort of used to be a safe
That's
houses.
Right. Yes. So they've used that same kind of language around safe schools to actually introduce a very different concept.
Yes,
and again, to our very vulnerable children.
And one would ask, safety for whom?
Very true. Very true.
It's just astounding.
And it's something that's been a program that's been rolled out without parental consent or consultation. So the more parents find out about it and the more their voices are lent to the disagreement around this program, the better off we'll be. But parents need to know what their children are being taught in school.
And just being exposed to it, it's mind-boggling. It really is. So we then roll on to something which is equally contentious, is actually same-sex adoption.
Sure.
So you've had something to say about that as well.
Certainly have. Norm, certainly have. So last year in Parliament, the incoming new government brought in the same-sex adoption bill. So now here in Victoria, babies can be adopted and children can be adopted to same-sex couples. Now, there's a couple of really big implications to this. One is there are very few babies that are up for adoption. Now, this relates, of course, to our conversations on abortion as well. But there's only about 20 a year. Now, it hasn't happened yet, but if we do put in a quota system, which, as we know, these Labor governments love quota systems, we'll have a quota of those babies, very small number of babies going to same-sex couples. The other concern I have around the same-sex adoption is birth certificates are changed. So birth certificates now will have 2 dads or 2 mums without any recognition of the child's actual genetic heritage.
Right.
And that is a huge step to take. So my belief is that we are creating another stolen generation. We know the problems we've had with adoption in the past. We've had to apologise, and rightly so, for what we did to Indigenous Australians. We've had to apologise, and rightly so, for what we did in the 60s to children and to their mothers in the forced adoptions. And now we are going to have to apologise to these children of same-sex couples for denying them their genetic identity.
Yes. Honestly, there's going to be quite a lot of apology going on, I suggest.
I think you're right.
So this is all, it was originated around your Infant Viability Act. Can we just cover again, that will be, when's the second reading?
Second reading will be in April, and then it will be debated on the 25th of May.
25th of May.
Yes.
Now, we're out of time. Rachel, thank you so much for the input on these really contentious issues and for the work that you're doing on that bill. It's fantastic, and good luck with it.
Thanks for the opportunity, Norm. I appreciate coming in.
Thank you. You've been watching Support Life, and we'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.